Okay, here we are. I want to welcome everyone tonight to chapter 8 in the study of Isaiah, and I titled it A Son, an Invasion, and Waiting for the Lord. So let's begin with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Bless you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Okay, tonight, let me go ahead and scroll through some of these things. There's a standard stuff. Tonight, we're going to be right in this area right here, 732 BCE, right in there. In this one, it'll be the line should be moved over a little bit, but it's such a pain that it took us to move that line over. I didn't do it because number one, when I tried to move it and stuff, I didn't know how to do it, and it just magically appeared where I was supposed to be, and so I left it there. All right, it's kind of like with classical music. If it ain't Baroque, don't fix it. So let's go ahead with Carl. We'll get that one. Verse 1. Then Adonai said to me, take yourself a great tablet and write on it with a man's stylus, Maher-shalal-hashbaz. All right, so you remember a little bit about chapter 7. They're talking about the sign of Emmanuel, and that was primarily for the sake of Ahaz, the king of Judah, and that was Emmanuel. The sign of Maher-shalal-hashbaz was actually for all the people of Judah. Now, it gets a little confusing because actually what we'll actually come to look at is that the child prophesied that his mother would call him Emmanuel, God with us, is, I believe, the same child as Maher-shalal-hashbaz. And so Emmanuel is much easier to say and to sing to, but it's the same person, just named by different people. The mother said Emmanuel, then God told Isaiah to call him Maher-shalal-hashbaz. And so the prophecies that were to Ahaz back in chapter 7, they're generally negative, the ones regarding the Emmanuel. But the following prophecies to the Judahites in verses 1 to 10 are more positive. They're not so negative. And these instructions for the Lord evidently came to Isaiah in the middle of the Syro-Ephraimitic war, the Syrian, where we had Syria and Israel, the northern tribes, warring against Judah. So anyway, having put those words together, those two together, make it a little bit more coherent and maybe cohesive. So let's go on. This chapter 8 is a continuation of the things that were going on in chapter 7. And so when we talk about Emmanuel, and especially in its place with its connection to the Messiah, because that's what Matthew harked back to in Isaiah, the birth of Yeshua. Well, again, we have to look at it. I think it's a dual event, a parallel event, in that the one child was was for a prophecy to Ahaz, the king of Judah, and also it was for future generations too, for the Messiah. And so it gets a little bit confusing, and especially when we talk about, that we talked last week about how it was a young maiden, or a maiden shall conceive, rather than a virgin. It was the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew, said virgin, just to reiterate that a young unmarried girl in Jewish culture was certainly going to be a virgin, because obviously young Jewish girls never played around. Okay, so they just wanted to make sure that you understood that a young Jewish girl that wasn't married was a virgin. So that was just that was a definition that they couldn't pass up. So anyway, but in this case, the young unmarried, or the young maiden, may have been the wife of Isaiah, in that they're talking about that she would bear a child, and so it might have been right then when Isaiah was getting married to this woman, and we'll look at it in just a minute. So I probably have thoroughly confused everybody at this point. So let's just go to the scripture at hand here, verse 1. And as already said, the sign of the child, Emmanuel, was for Ahaz. Okay, now the sign that we're seeing here with Maher-shalal-hashbaz, that is a sign for the people of Judah. Now, it talks about a large, or a gillayon. Okay, a gillayon is in Hebrew is not a scroll. Okay, it's more like a big a big board, a big flat board that could be put a placard, as it were, that it could be put up there and posted so that people could go by it and look at it. And so we don't know what a man's stylus is. I mean, some people said, well, they're trying to compare it. Well, it's just a standard stylus, that as opposed to, I don't know, did women have a stylus? I think mostly women weren't even taught to read and write in those days. So I think one of the commentators, and it sort of made sense, he said that the man's stylus would be like where it talks about a man's cubit, or a cubit of a man, was kind of a standard definition. Well, in this case, it was maybe a figure of speech, meaning that to be clearly understood, that you write it in a man's stylus, write it in a fashion that people can look at it and read it and understand it. Not like the script that you get when you go to the doctor's office and he writes something down, and the pharmacist is somehow supposed to figure all of this out, and hopefully that when he gives you the prescription, he's actually giving you blood pressure medicine instead of a super laxative or something, just because he can't read the writing. So God tells Isaiah to write this down very clearly so that people can understand it. And the name, okay, the name that God tells Isaiah to name his son is Maher-shalal-hashbaz. Okay, and it means speeding to the plunder, or hurrying to the spoil. Now, So supposedly one of the commentators that I was reading said that that soldiers would shout these words to their comrades as they were running and defeating the enemy, and they were plundering their foes and I guess what we would say today was, hurry up, let's go get the good stuff. And so, but that's not nearly as poetic as speeding to yon plunder. Certainly a name like Maher-shalal-hashbaz, a very difficult name. So this would be a public notice, and it was to announce the coming attack on Syria and Israel by Assyria, and as well as to announce the birth of Isaiah's son. So Isaiah was supposed to make this kind of as eye-catching as possible. So anyway, let's go ahead. Verse 2, so I took for myself trustworthy witnesses, Uriah the Kohen and Zechariah son Jeberechiah. Okay, yeah, I didn't practice that one before I actually looked at it. Jeberechiah. And so he took these witnesses with him. Now, why would he have brought these witnesses? And it's a little unclear who's the one that ordered the witnesses. Did God order the witnesses, or did Isaiah order the witnesses? But anyway, the two names that we have here, Uriah the Kohen. There was also Uriah the Kohen was the one that went to Damascus, and when he came as the high priest, and then when he came back, he had the priests take down the bronze altar that had been in place for many years, and install in its place another style of altar that he had seen in Damascus. I mean, this is really heretical kind of stuff. You take down something that God had specified that you do it this way, and then come back in and bring in something from the pagans, and to have an altar that way. So you can see why God was not really happy there. But anyway, so that's probably the guy, but he's a high priest. So Isaiah would bring him in, or God would bring him in, either one, whoever was the one that the Hebrew is not real clear. But the high priest, that's about a high profile as you can get. And then the other one, we really don't know. I mean, this is definitely not Jeremiah, the biblical prophet, but it could be Jeremiah, a royal prophet, or at least Jeremiah, a very high-ranking public official, somebody that everyone would have known, and someone of good repute. He would have been an honorable person, or at least he would have been above reproach in this regard. So the reason that he would have brought them in there to watch him put up this sign and write out the prophecy was so that later on people couldn't come back and say, well, yeah, but Isaiah wrote this thing after the events already took place, so sure, he looked like he was a prophet and that he got everything right. Well, with these two guys there, then they would know that no, it didn't quite happen that way. So Isaiah put out the prophecy, and then the events occurred. All right. So verse 3, then I went to the prophetess, and she conceived and bore a son. Then Adonai said to me, call his name Maher-shalal-hashbaz. All right. Now you can see in here that, okay, the words, Isaiah went to the prophetess. So what does that mean? Well, the prophetess was his wife. They got together, had sex, and voila. Next thing you know, there's a kid. And so she conceived and bore a son. So we don't know that much about whether she was already a prophet in her own right. Some commentators will admit that possibly so, and then other ones would say, no, she's they call her the prophetess just because Isaiah was the prophet, and so that's why, much like, we have a rabbi and then his wife is called a Rebbetzin. I guess
no, it's Mrs. Rabbi.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay. I was thinking in some churches, and I hear that the pastor is Pastor John, and then or they will say the pastors John and Mary Gubelschnorz. I don't know, whatever their last name is, but they call them both the pastors. And whether or not the wife had gone to seminary and was ordained or whatever, but it's a way of connecting the wife to the ministry involved. So we don't really know whether she was a prophet beforehand or not, or what. It's really not important to the story, but that's just what he called her. I went to the prophetess, and she conceived and bore a son. So here we normally, when it says, and he approached, that's in some of the translations. In our translation, it says I went to, but as approached, I approached. It's kind of like the old deal of, and he knew his wife and she conceived. Okay, it's Hebrew niceties for just saying, yeah, they had sex and that was it. So and then there's the problem of, Isaiah had already had a son, and so there's conjecture that this was his second wife because the first wife had passed away. Because you remember his first wife, they had a son, and Sha'ir Jashub and Sha'ar Jashub. And so but now that he'll have a second wife, and this one will bear the Emmanuel child. Okay. So she conceived and bore the son. She named him Emmanuel as a sign for Ahaz. Okay. And then Adonai named this child, and he called him Maher-shalal-hashbaz. So that's the way that one went. Any comments or questions on that? Because it is kind of confusing. Okay, nobody's going.
How is he called Emmanuel?
Because in chapter 7, that's what it said. It would be God with us.
Oh. Okay.
It was a sign, but it was a sign. The same child was a sign for Ahaz to tell him that, hey, look, you don't have to make these treaties, this treaty with Assyria, because God is with you. You don't have to get somebody else to help you. And so and basically it was okay, so Rebetson. Okay, who's that? Carmen, do you write that down? I don't know who wrote that.
No, not me.
Okay.
I don't know how to spell it. I was just saying that you're right about that, because that's what Ziva calls Miss Pat.
Calls her the Rebetson? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm spelling it right though.
Yeah, that's close enough. But that's basically that's it. You're the rabbi's wife, and so the rabbi's wife fills in a lot of the spaces that the rabbi can never ever hope to get around to. Okay, and she is generally, in our case especially, instrumental in the success of Tree of Life. And if she were not around, then I'd be looking for someone else to take over Tree of Life, because you know, I'm too old to get another wife and be retrained, and so she wouldn't be as good as Pat is anyway. So, but anyway, that's going back to the name of you know, the prophetess and so forth. All right, so before verse 4. For before the child will have knowledge to cry, my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus and the spoil of Samaria will be carried away before the king of Assyria. All right, now this is a little dodgy, in that we know that Tiglath-Pileser the third, who is the king of Assyria, he would come down and attack Israel and Damascus. Now he would conquer Damascus. Okay, then 10 years later, he would actually come in and finally defeat Samaria, the capital of Israel. But he did come down and just basically destroyed the nation of Israel, took over, you know, just took over everything, and except for the environs right around the capital city. So for 10 years, you know, Israel was just the city or the area around the Samaria. And so in this case, it said before the child had the knowledge to say, my father, my mother, you know. Okay, so how old is a child when they can say stuff like mama or dada or daddy, you know, whatever, the stuff like this? That would be what, less than a year maybe, or a year old, or, you know, you got a kid that's just not interested in talking, it could be a little while longer. But we do know that these events of Damascus falling and the invasion of the area of Israel was in 732. This was a warning. Actually, the invasion of Israel was a warning to Israel that they needed to get back to God, and they didn't. And so then 10 years later, Assyria came back in for a second swipe at the ring there, and at that point, then they besieged Samaria and destroyed it, and Samaria fell. And then, you know, then they carried off a lot of people, and then they brought in other folks and assimilated, and so that the area of Israel, that the northern tribes, were assimilated, and they pretty much lost their identity as really Jewish people. And that's why in later years, around Yeshua's time, the Jews looked at people from Samaria as second-class citizens, and maybe just you know, lower than dogs. So you know, that's kind of the history of that. So, but basically what he's saying is, before this kid could get to the point of calling his mother or his father and speaking, of maybe a year, that Damascus and Samaria would no longer be a threat to Judah. So just hang in there, just wait on the Lord, it will come. But you know, they didn't want to do that, and Ahaz was trying to make he made a treaty with Assyria, and that's basically like you know, making a deal with the devil. So anyway, verse 5 and 6 here. Then Adonai spoke to me further, saying, because these people have refused the soft flowing waters of Shiloah and rejoice with Rezin and Remaliah's son. Okay. All right. So what does that mean? Means that not only had Ahaz, he had rejected God, but the people had too. This jumps back and it corresponds to chapter 7, verses 18 to 25, and both of these scriptures talk about the name Emmanuel, and then this one here that Maher-shalal-hashbaz. Both of them had a descriptor around the name, and both of them would be positive and a negative significance. So, but now the tone that Isaiah is bringing into us is shifting over to the people themselves, not to just the king or to the leadership. So, so God is telling Isaiah to, okay, now this is what you're going to say. The waters, they're talking about the waters of Siloam. Shiloah is the same as Siloam. Okay, and what that is the flow of water from the springs of Gihon in up underneath the city of David in Jerusalem. They flowed down through, and they'd kind of channeled this stuff around in little channels and aqueducts and so forth, and it would flow down to the pool of Siloam. And but it was a spring, and it flowed through there, but it was pretty unimpressive, really. I mean, if you've ever been around a natural spring, and it's not like water pouring out of a say a big fire hydrant that's when somebody hits a fire hydrant and blows and knocks it over with, runs over with a car, and the fire hydrant breaks off of the pipe and it shoots a geyser up in the air, however high, because of the water pressure. No, this one was not that impressive, and even today you can go there and you can walk. Now, the Hezekiah's tunnel had not been built at this point. This is Hezekiah comes after these guys, and he's the one that had the tunnel dug so that they would always have water in Jerusalem, and that water would not be one of the reasons why the people would have to surrender to a siege, because they would always have water. But again, small stream, it's not that big a deal. I mean, even today, you can walk through Hezekiah's tunnel, and you can notice that there is a current moving through there. And as you walk through the tunnel and in the water, it's only about maybe 2.5 feet tall, 2.5 feet deep. And so depending on the length of your legs, whether what gets wet, but it's not spectacular. So but it's always flowing. It was flowing. What was this? 2,500 years ago, 2,700 years ago. It was flowing. It is still flowing today in 2023. With all of the things that have gone on all throughout history, the springs at Gihon are still flowing. Water still flows down to the pool of Siloam. And in fact, they've now started excavating the entire pool of Siloam, and to basically not restore it back to its former grandeur, but at least excavate it to the point where it will hold water and you can see the pool, because there's just a small pool there now. When we were there, it was just a small pool, and they said the rest of the pool has yet to be excavated because it belongs to I believe it was the Armenian church, and they were not about to give it up for any reason. And so then evidently there was a reason, or maybe it's just a governmental edict that, yeah, you will give this up because this is national Jewish, Israel stuff. Anyway, they're gonna, they got it opened up now. So, all right. So it goes on and says that this was flowing. It's a metaphor for God. He's just back there in the background. He's maybe not doing things really spectacularly, but you can always count on him. He's always there. And so there it talks about the rejoicing. They rejoiced with Rezin and Remaliah's son. Okay. Now, it depends on the commentator, the scholar, whatever, the guy that's writing whatever book, as to what this means. Now, does it mean that they are rejoicing that that Samaria and Damascus have got their clock cleaned and they're no longer a threat? Or had this not happened yet and they are rejoicing that, hey, that there is, was there a Samaria and Damascus friendly coalition somewhere in Jerusalem? There's not a whole lot of evidence that there ever was. So it's a little bit open to interpretation as to what does that mean, whether they were rejoicing in the demise of them, or they were rejoicing in something else. I don't know. I think I wrote down here what I think, that I believe that they were rejoicing that, okay, these guys are no longer trying to make war against us. So, and they've been knocked down. So we don't have to worry about them anymore. It says, therefore, behold, Adonai is bringing on them the waters of the river, mighty and massive. Assyria's king with all his glory, it will rise over all its channels and spill over all its banks. Okay, now here we have the comparison of the small little stream that flows in Jerusalem. It's not spectacular, but it's always there. You can always count on it. It's old faithful, only not a geyser. It's just always flowing about the same. But and then they're comparing to the Euphrates, which at times can overflow its banks. Even the Jordan could overflow its banks in a lot of rains and snowfall, snow melt, and so forth. But and what happens when rivers overflow their banks? There's destruction. And so that's what they're talking about here, is that, okay, in comparison to trusting God and the ever always constant stream that you can actually count on, then you're going to have the Euphrates River, the river of Assyria, it's called. That would be the Euphrates. And it's just going to come sweeping down, because it's a big, wide river, especially back in those days. Okay, today, a lot of the water has been channeled.
My hand's up.
Irrigation and so forth. Your hand is up. Okay.
Yes. Okay. I don't understand why Judah is happy that Assyria's going to defeat Israel. I thought Israel was Judah.
No, Israel was the northern 10 tribes. They had an alliance with Damascus, or Syria, and they had been making war against Judah, the southern 2 tribes, Judah and Simeon, and part of Benjamin, actually. But they had been that actually come in and besieged Jerusalem for a time. It didn't work, but no, they had been fighting back and forth for a number of years between Israel and Judah. They were not allies.
Okay.
Israel was the northern 10 tribes. Judah the southern two tribes. Okay.
Okay. They don't like each other.
Yeah, they didn't like each other. So they were so the people of Jerusalem and Judah were relieved. They were happy that Samaria and Damascus or Syria had been either defeated or were no longer, at least they were no longer a threat to the people of Judah and Jerusalem.
Okay, thank you.
Question. Yeah, that's one of the things that you have to always try to remember is, okay, who's Israel? What are they talking about? Was it Israel? Is it Judah? And sometimes the Bible kind of it's kind of confusing which one they're talking about. And so anyway, that's what that means, is that it's one of those deals of be careful what you wish for, because now instead of the small constant pure water of the babbling brook of Jerusalem that you can count on, you're going to have this raging river that's from Assyria it's not clean, it's not controllable, it's dangerous, and so but that's the comparison. You wanted Assyria, well, guess what? You're going to get its river along with you. So, and the contrast between these two just could not be more stark. Then it will sweep through Judah, overflow as it passes through, reaching even up to the neck. So the spread of its wings will be the full breadth of your land. Emmanuel. Okay, that is so strange. That is just really strange. All right, the Assyrians, they're going to come through, and they're not going to stop just with Damascus and Israel, or Samaria and that area. They're going to sweep down into Judah as well. And it said that they're going to sweep down with this river, that it's just going to fill up the valleys. And again, we're talking metaphorically, filling up the valleys and up until it gets to the neck of Judah. Now, what would that mean? Okay, think about this. Okay, when you're thinking about that, okay, the water has come up. It's come up. And you're finally to here. Now you're up on your tippy toes and stuff. And so it's got to the point now where it's even over your mouth. You can't even breathe through your mouth anymore. You just got your little nose sticking out, and you're just about to get to the point where you're going to drown. And so, and the other metaphor there is that it's coming in to spread its wings over the full breadth of your land, and there are some scholars, that talk about, that say, well, no, because it's shifted there, and this bird now is God's protection going to come over. But it doesn't say that. It's just another way of saying, okay, you're going to be overrun almost all the way to extinction. But then what does it say? Just one single word, Emmanuel. What does Emmanuel mean? It means God with us. Okay, so there's a comment here. It says, the jealousy of Ephraim shall depart. This is from Isaiah 11:13. Okay, this is from Joseph. And it says, the jealousy of Ephraim shall depart, and those who harass Judah will be cut off. Ephraim shall not be jealous of Judah, and Judah will not harass Ephraim. Okay, that's a future prophecy. Yes, they will come together in later days, and even we see today. Okay, there is no, you don't see any infighting between Jerusalem and the people up in the Golan Heights, or in Shechem, or some of these cities that are other than what what they have what they call the occupied territories. Yeah, they're occupied, all right. They're occupied by non-Israelis that they've allowed in there to carve out their little areas in Jerusalem, in Israel, of hate and discontent. And so, but yeah, you no longer see the infighting between the north part of Israel and the southern part of Israel. And so it's all one united country. But the idea that Emmanuel, I mean, he's talking about here you're just about to the point where you're gonna drown. You know, the water's gonna cover you, and you're gonna die. But then it says, Emmanuel, God is with us, and so it gives us some hope. All right, we'll go to the next verses. Make an uproar, O peoples, but you will be broken in pieces. He's speaking to the Gentile world here. Give ear, all you of far countries. Arm yourselves, yet be shattered. Arm yourselves, yet be shattered. He repeats it. Take counsel together, but it will amount to nothing. Speak a word, but it will not stand. For what? God is with us. Emmanuel. All right, so this is a complete change of tone here. The prophet here, he's called on all of the heathens of the nations, you know, all these pagan nations, to listen up. And it said, you're going to be shattered, even though it says you gird yourselves for battle against God's people. You arm yourselves. Okay. And I think some of the translations will actually say gird yourselves. And that means you're putting on these big belts of armor. And in some cases where in the Bible it says to gird your loins, that means to reach down, grab the bottom of the hem of your long robe that you're wearing, pull it up and to where it's up here, and then you wrap your belt around that so that then you can run and you're not going to trip over your robe. All right. So all of these things that says to gird yourselves or to arm yourself are in preparation for action. And so instead of Jerusalem and Judah being destroyed at this point, it's going to be the other nations that will be destroyed. Now we know later on, 100 years later, and Judah has not heeded the call of God to repent and come to him. Okay, finally God says, okay, this is enough. We're going to go ahead and you're going to be defeated, and we're going to have the exile, and maybe you'll learn something from that. So the enemies, no matter who they were, the enemies of Jerusalem were going to fail. They could scheme, they could plan, they could arm, they could do all of these things, but eventually they're going to fail at this time. Okay. Assyria never did defeat Jerusalem. Babylon did, but not Assyria. Okay. So, okay, verse 11. For thus Adonai spoke to me with a strong hand, warning me that I should not walk in the way of these people. All right, so Isaiah now passed along instructions from God and in a most powerful way. Says, that Adonai spoke to me with a strong hand. Okay, that meant, and that's remember how he brought the people out of Egypt with a strong arm, with a strong hand. So God is saying in no uncertain terms, no quibbling, no niceties, anything. It's a very strong and powerful message here, and warning Isaiah not to fall into the same way that these people are, and that he should, that they had a defeatist mindset. They had a mindset that they were going to take care of things on their own, in their own strength, and they didn't have to rely on God. And God is telling Isaiah, said, don't you even go there. Okay, don't go there because that's the wrong way. Don't walk in the same way these people are walking, because God had given them instructions. Do not go to Assyria for a treaty. Ahaz did it anyway, and so it was not going to end well. Surely they were not totally defeated, but they were diminished by Assyria, and it would be another 100 years then before they were totally defeated and the temple destroyed in 586 BCE. All right. So at this point, it's to oppose. But God was bringing in Assyria to accomplish His purpose, and that was to defeat Damascus and defeat Samaria. So, kind of paradoxically, to oppose Assyria at this point then was also to oppose God, because He was using Assyria as a hammer, as a tool of justice against Israel, Israel, the northern tribes, and Damascus. So, verse 12 and 13. Now, do not say it's a conspiracy about everything that these people call a conspiracy. You must not fear or tremble at what they hear. Adonai's vowed, Him will you sanctify, and let Him be your fear, trembling at Him. Okay, so God is telling Isaiah, okay, look, don't be afraid of all this stuff. Don't be going around saying, it's a conspiracy, and trying to. We know all about conspiracies in this present age. That's a big deal. If you disagree with something that's going on in the government, well, then you're just nothing but a conspiracy theorist. And even though with as it turned out with COVID, many of us said, this is a little shaky. There's a whole lot of wonky stuff here. And now we're finally coming to find out, it was, there's a lot of stuff that, who knows if ever we'll find out the hoaxes that went along with this stuff. But we were called conspiracy theorists. And so God told Isaiah, don't get involved in the conspiracy theories and all that kind of stuff. All this stuff that's going on in your own government there, put it aside. Don't get involved in it. Don't get paranoid, because guess what? God Himself was orchestrating these things. He was making all of this. He was moving the chess pieces on the board. Because why? Because He had a plan. And so that Isaiah should actually fear the Lord and not any of these foreign potentates, because it's the Lord that can make things happen. These other guys can only do it if God says they can do it. All right. We're jeepers, we're running out of time. He will be a sanctuary, but a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel, a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Many people, many among them will stumble, fall, and be broken, snared, and caught up. Okay, this is pretty. It's easy to understand. God is going to be a refuge for Isaiah and that small remnant, those people that have stayed true and faithful to the Lord. But to everyone else, boy, He's going to trip them up, and they're going to fall. They're going to be defeated. But He would bring destruction onto those that didn't trust in Him. The ones that trusted in Assyria, trusted in this, trusted in that, they would fall. Now, and like I've said, Jerusalem would eventually fall in 586 BCE. In fact, they had kind of been overrun a little bit in 605 BCE, and that's when Daniel and his friends were exported to Babylon. But then it was another 9 years before then they would come back. And at this point, then, because the king had made the king of Judah had made an alliance against Babylon, and so the Babylon came in and says, you can't do that. And so that's when they came in, and at that point they destroyed the temple. Okay, and that just took the soul out of the Jewish people at that point. 16 to 18, bind up the testimony, seal the instruction with my disciples. I will wait for Adonai, who is hiding His face from the house of Jacob, and I will look eagerly for Him. Here I am with the children that Adonai has given me as signs and wonders in Israel, from Adonai Svaot, who dwells on Mount Zion. Okay, So verse 16, it's kind of up in the air who's speaking here. Some commentators, some writers say, no, this is God saying, bind up the testimony and seal the instruction with my disciples, being the disciples of God. And others say, no, this is Isaiah speaking, and he's talking about his own disciples. And so I don't know. You look at it, and to me, it makes more sense that this is God speaking, because he's the one that can seal up, bind up the testimony and seal up the instruction. He's the one that's giving the instructions. And so, and then it goes into verse 17, where Isaiah is saying, I will wait for Adonai. No matter all this stuff swirling around me, I'm going to wait for Adonai, who's hiding his face from the house of Jacob. Now, the house of Jacob here is it's probably, it refers to the northern tribes, okay? And before it says both houses of Israel, the scriptures say both houses of Israel. That means the northern 10 tribes, the southern 10 tribes, southern 2 tribes, all of Israel at once. When it says both the houses of Israel, that would be the house of David, in Jerusalem, and then the northern tribes. Okay, so and then Isaiah is looking at his 2 sons that he had, and he said, here are my signs that God has preserved things, and he will preserve things, because he gave me these sons that he promised and that he prophesied that I would have. And so they are something that for Isaiah, they were a sign of God's sovereignty and God's trust, and that God was going to take care of him. When in verse 19, when they say to you, consult the mediums and necromancers who chirp and mutter, shouldn't a people seek their God? Should a people consult the dead on behalf of the living? To Torah and to the testimony, if they do not speak according to his word, it's because they have no light. All right, this is a great couple of verses here, because and again, the scholars disagree on what it exactly means, if it's a call here and a response here, or however that works. But the bottom line is, those that loss of faith in God results in an increase in superstition and the occult. And the unfaithful in Judah were encouraging their brethren to seek advice about the future, from mediums, wizards, fortune tellers, whatever, however you want to call them, instead of God. Okay, we see this today. When people lose faith in God, what do we see in our own world today? Well, you see just a lot of the occult, and even out in the country. We were driving to my brother's place way up in the middle of Texas, and I mean, it's just nothing but ranch land, and there are thousands more head of cattle in the county that he lives in than there are human beings, with the towns, and even in the towns and so forth. There's thousands and thousands of head of cattle, but maybe 1/100th of that number in people. And sure enough, on this road there was a sign. Somebody was advertising that out there in the middle of nowhere, advertising that they were a tarot card reader and a spiritist and so on and so forth. And so I thought, wow, even out here in the middle of nowhere, you're going to find something like that. And so as people lose their faith in God, what do? They turn to other things, and they turn to the dark forces that are out there. And there are those things, okay? But then what does Isaiah come out? He said, should we do this? What then? Shouldn't a people seek their God? And should people consult with the dead on behalf of the living? Going back to, if you went back to the story of Saul going to the witch of Endor, so that he brings back, the witch of Endor brings back the prophet Samuel. Now, how did that happen? Only because God allowed it. Because a person like that would have no power to bring back one of God's people back to the earth and out of death. So, but Isaiah then says, no, to Torah and to the testimony. That's what we should be raising up there. To Torah and the testimony, meaning the stories of God, the oral history that God had done, all the things that God had done for his people. And that's and so he's saying that, if these people don't speak according to this word, the word of God, it's because they have no light. There's nothing but darkness in them. And there are many other verses in the Bible that talk to this, that men love the darkness because they delight in the darkness because their deeds are evil, and going so on and so forth. So Torah is God's instructions. That is the source of truth, not all of these occult people. Says they will pass this way that are hard pressed and hungry, and it will turn out that when they are hungry, they will become enraged and curse their king and their God. Whether they turn their faces upward or look to the earth, behold, distress and darkness, the gloom of anguish. They will be driven into darkness. Okay, these are the people that have turned their back on God and going their own way with the occult, and they're gonna go through a very, very hard time. And God is gonna, because when you turn away from God, He removes His protection from you. Then you're gonna have hard times. That's just that's a matter of fact. That so many things could be happening to us today but they don't, because why? We're under God's protective umbrella. And so he's saying here, okay, you've turned away against me. I'm going to remove my protection, and you're going to go through all of these things. And these people then are going to turn against the king, their government, and they're going to turn against God. And so no matter where they look, if they look to the heavens, they look to the earth, they look for everywhere to find help, they're not going to find it, and they will be driven further into the darkness, because why? God's given them up. They've turned their back on God. He's given them up to their reprobate mind, and so they're not going to find any relief no matter what they do. Finally, last verse. But there is no gloom to her who was in anguish, as in the time past. He treated lightly the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, but in the future he will bring glory by the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. Okay, this is a little bit, it's a little bit hard to understand, but the gloom is not final. God, He's not going to be satisfied that His people have experienced the results of their rebellion. He says, okay, you got what's coming to you. And so then he said that, that experience in itself was not the end. Okay, that's not the end of it all. But what it means is that it was a means. It was a means. It was not the end. It was a means. It was a means whereby God's goodness can be manifested in the salvation of a land. Now, now they're aware of the true source of its life. And so when every human attempt to bring light has failed, and our own, we can't bring things to light, a lot of things we cannot do, then God can bring the light. Not because He must, but because human craft has discovered the key to force Him but merely, and not because human crafts has discovered the key to force him, but merely out of his own grace. God doesn't, we can't force God into doing this thing. I get kind of aggravated at some of these preachers that said, that if you read this verse in the Bible, then God is he has to do what you tell him to do. No, he doesn't. God, you can't command God like some genie in the bottle. And just trying to read some verse and say you're going to hold God's feet to the fire because he has to do it because whatever. No, God doesn't have to do anything, and he will do things in his way, in his timing. Okay, he's never late, he's always on time. So I think God never does the land that first felt the oppression of Assyria up in the northern part of Israel. Well, then that land is now finally going to shine, and it's going to be a great land. And and today, look at the valley of Jezreel today. If you stand up on Mount Carmel and look down on the plain, that valley, wow, what fantastic agriculture is there! It's just amazing, and all over Israel, these places that just they can grow food like crazy, man. Those guys are really good. And even in Europe, they said, well, we're gonna this BDS movement where we're gonna not take anything from Israel. Then they realized how much of their food supply came from Israel, and so then the Europeans said, well, maybe not. We'll just talk about it or whatever. But they didn't divest themselves of the Jewish agriculture, and but God, there's always a light at the end. God brings an avenue of salvation, even after he may bring us through some tough times to get our attention in some cases, or just in punishment because we couldn't get our attention. But at the end, there is a way of salvation, because why? It gets back to the New Testament where it says, he is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to him, to the glory of God. So that all should